Welcome to Kural Inspired Stories, where ancient wisdom meets thrilling adventure. Each episode, we journey through time, uncovering the timeless lessons of the Thirukkural through stories filled with mystery, discovery, and action. In this first story, The First Letter and the Forgotten Path, we follow Kia and Neo as they stumble upon an ancient secret, one that leads them into the past to meet the great sage Thiruvallur himself. But before they can find their way home, they must unlock the meaning of the very first letter and the wisdom it holds. If you'd like to read along, you can grab a copy of the book on Amazon by following the link in the description. Get ready for a journey filled with adventure, riddles, and the power of knowledge in action. Let's begin. Introduction. If there was one thing Kia and Neo agreed on, it was that their parties, Grandma's history lessons, were the longest, most tedious part of summer. "Come, sit," Party had said that afternoon, patting the woven mat on the floor. "Today, I will teach you about the greatest wisdom ever written." Neo groaned as he sprawled lazily across a cushion. "Party, it's summer. Who studies during the holidays?" Kia wasn't paying attention either. She was flipping through a comic book while half listening. "You will learn about Thiruvallur today," Party continued, ignoring them. "A great poet and philosopher who wrote the Thirukkural, 1,330 couplets filled with timeless wisdom." Neo yawned dramatically. "Oh, I don't get why we have to learn old poetry." Party's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Because, dear, these words are more powerful than you know." "But they're just words," Kia said, not looking up from her book. "It's not like they can do anything." Party smiled knowingly. "That is where you are wrong." She picked up an old leather-bound book and ran her fingers over its cover. The Thirukkural is not just poetry. It is a key, a guide to life. Without understanding it, you may wander in the dark, even with all the knowledge in the world. Neo whispered to Kia, "Or we could just Google." Party pretended not to hear him and flipped open the book. "Shall we start with the first Kural?" But at that moment, Neo leapt to his feet. "Actually, I think I left something in the backyard." Kia snapped her book shut. "Yeah, me too." And before Party could stop them, they were already running out the door. Party's house had a huge backyard, which was filled with mango trees, a small well, and an old storage shed that no one ever used. "Nice save," Kia muttered, still holding her comic book. Neo grinned. "We just escaped a history lecture. That's legendary." They wandered toward the old storage shed to hide, mainly to kill time. Neo leaned against the door, which was always locked. They had never been allowed inside the shed, but suddenly Neo felt the door ease, and it creaked open. Kia frowned. "Wait, I thought this place was locked." Neo stepped inside, dust swirling around him. Maybe Party forgot to lock it. The inside of the shed was dimly lit and filled with old trunks, rolled up carpets, and shelves stacked with dusty books. But something felt off. There was something unexpected at the far end of the shed against the stone wall. A tall stone archway covered in ancient carvings stood between the shelves. Kia's breath caught. "Neo, what is that?" Neo ran his hand along the carvings. "It looks ancient." Then right in the center of the archway, they noticed something even stranger. A symbol was carved deep into the stone, one they had seen before. The letter A, written in Tamil script, "Ah." Kia's mind raced. This is the same letter Party was talking about. Neo squinted at the archway. "You don't think it's some kind of secret door, do you?" Kia hesitated. "Secret doors? You've been watching too many Indiana Jones movies." She reached forward and pressed her palm against the carved A. See? Nothing happened. A low humming sound filled the room. Then a golden light flickered across the archway, spreading through the carvings like water, illuminating the stone with an otherworldly glow. Neo stumbled backwards. Okay, I was not expecting that. Before either of them could react, the golden light expanded, swallowing them whole, and the next thing they knew, they were falling. Kia hit the ground first, her hands sinking into warm, soft sand. Neo landed a second later, groaning. Ow! Kia pushed herself up, shaking dust off her clothes. Where are we? The landscape looked completely different. Instead of Party's back garden, they were in the middle of a village with stone buildings, their rooftops covered in dried thatch. The sky was a deep shade of orange, as if the sun had just begun to set. People in long robes and simple tunics walked through the streets, carrying baskets of fruit and pots of water. Neo blinked. Kia, why does everything look like the pictures in Party's history book? Kia turned, her heart pounding. Neo, I think we just... She didn't get to finish, because at that moment, someone stepped toward them. A tall man with a calm expression, dressed in simple white robes, his long beard moving slightly in the breeze. His eyes were wise and knowing, like he had seen far more than he spoke of. Neo gasped. No way! The man smiled slightly. You are not from this time, he said, and yet you are here. Kia's breath caught in her throat. Are you? She hesitated. The man nodded. I am Thirukkural, he said, and you, it seems, have a lesson to learn. Neo gaped. I can't believe this. We were trying to escape a history lesson. Thirukkural gestured toward the village. Come, he said, let me show you around. And just like that, their first adventure began. Chapter 1. A Mystery in the Village. Kia and Neo followed Thirukkural through the narrow dusty streets of the ancient village called Thulir, their eyes darting around at the unfamiliar sights and sounds. In the bustling marketplace, women in simple saris balanced pots of water on their heads, children played games with carved wooden toys, and traders sold fresh mangoes, turmeric, and woven cloths. Okay, this is officially the coolest field trip ever, Neo whispered. Still trying to wrap her head around everything, Kia whispered back, This isn't a field trip, Neo. We're in the past. Neo shrugged. Same thing. They followed Thirukkural toward a large gathering near the village centre, where a group of people stood around a stone tablet, deep in discussion. At the heart of the group, an elderly scholar with a long white beard was arguing with a much younger man. How can you say knowledge begins with a single letter? The young man challenged. Knowledge comes from experience, from learning, not from letters. The old scholar sighed heavily. And yet, all learning begins with a single step, does it not? Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some villagers nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads. Thirukkural turned toward Kia and Neo. This is why you are here. Listen carefully. Neo scratched his head. Wait, is this a history debate? Because I did not sign up for this. Thirukkural chuckled. It is more than that, young one. The first letter is the foundation of all words. Without a beginning, where would language come from? And without language, where would knowledge be? Neo blinked. Whoa, that's actually kind of deep. Kia, still processing, turned to Thirukkural. But if this is so important, why is it still being debated? Shouldn't they already know the answer? Thirukkulal's expression grew thoughtful. Some things must be experienced to be understood. Neo groaned. That sounds like something Party would say. Thirukkural laughed. Okay, let me not keep you here any longer. You should go and explore the ancient ruins of a nearby temple. It's a great place for you to explore. That sounds more like it, cheered Neo. Show us the way. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Tablet. The air smelled of warm spices and firewood, mingling with the familiar scent of freshly tilled earth from the nearby fields. The rhythmic sounds of the village filled the air, women pounding rice, cattle bells clinking as herders led their animals home, and distant laughter from children playing near their temple pond. For most of the villagers, this was the time to rest, but Neo and Kia had no intention of stopping. Neo! Kia's voice rang across the dusty road, frustration laced in her tone. She hurried to catch up with her younger brother, who was already several steps ahead, practically bounding toward the ruins at the edge of the village. Would you just wait for once? She huffed. Neo did not wait. He never did. Kia, we have to check the ruins, he called back, barely glancing over his shoulder. I have a feeling we'll find something important. Kia rolled her eyes. Neo, you always say this. Well, didn't we find this ancient land? Neo grinned, adjusting the small cloth satchel slung over his shoulder. Besides, imagine if we find something that could be worth millions. Kia sighed. This was the thing about Neo. He wasn't just looking for adventure. He truly believed that forgotten places held treasure waiting to be uncovered. And truth be told, so did she. Together, they hurried past the last few houses of the village where the ruins of an ancient temple waited for them. The temple ruins stood at the northernmost edge of Tulir, beyond the fields and the centuries-old peepal tree that the villagers considered sacred. Long ago, this was a place of knowledge where scholars and seekers gathered to learn, but that was before the temple fell. Now, cracked stone pillars, some half buried in the earth, were all that remained. Vines crawled up what was left of the walls, and birds had built tiny nests in the cracks of the temple's faded carvings. Most villagers thought it was useless, just a pile of old rocks, but Neo and Kia saw something different. This place feels special, Neo murmured as they stepped into the clearing. He kicked at a loose stone, watching it roll, like it's waiting for us to find something. Kia took in their surroundings. The air felt cooler here, and the distant chirping of crickets made it seem like the ruins were whispering secrets from the past. All right, Neo said, climbing onto a fallen pillar. Let's look for anything unusual. A secret door, a hidden suitcase. Kia smirked. Or just more broken walls? But before she could finish her sentence, clink! Neo's feet had landed on something different, something hollow. Kia froze. Neo, what was that? Neo's eyes widened. I don't know. Without another word, he dropped to his knees and began scraping away the dirt with his hands. The ground was soft from years of neglect, and soon something smooth and solid began to emerge beneath the dust. A flat stone slab. Kia knelt beside him, her heart pounding. This isn't just any rock. The more they cleared away, the more intricate carvings appeared on the stone surface, loops, lines, and symbols they didn't recognize. Neo ran his fingers over them. It's writing, Kia's breath caught. The symbols were old, but precise. Someone had carved them carefully, meaning them to be remembered. And at the very center of the stone, a single deeply carved letter stood out. The letter A, just like they had seen on the arch back at Party's house. Neo frowned. What's so important about this letter? Kia hesitated. Maybe it's the beginning of something. Neo's eyes lit up. A secret message? A lost language? A treasure map leading to the greatest discovery ever? Kia smirked. Or it could be a sign that says, please do not touch unless you want trouble. Neo grinned. Too late for that. But deep inside, they both felt it. This tablet was different. It meant something. We have to take this to Thirukkural, Kia said. Neo nodded. If anyone can read this, it's him. The tablet was heavy. Even with both of them lifting together, it took all their strength to hoist it onto Neo's shawl, making a makeshift sling. I still say I could have carried it alone, Neo panted. Kia shot him a look. You almost dropped it on your foot, twice. As they dragged it toward the village, people started to notice. Muttu, the village potter, paused from shaping a clay bowl. What in the world are you two dragging through the streets? A rock, Neo said. Kia sighed. An important rock. We're taking it to Thiruvallur. The villagers whispered among themselves. Most villagers thought history was just that, history. But Neo and Kia knew better. The past still had stories to tell. The library was small yet rich in knowledge. Its walls were adorned with scrolls and palm leaf manuscripts, and the scent of aged paper and sandalwood lingered in the air. At the center of the room, under the dim glow of an oil lamp, Thiruvallur sat, his white robes neatly folded, his hands gently rolling a fresh scroll. Neo and Kia dragged the tablet before him with a loud thud. Thiruvallur raised an eyebrow. Neo wiped his forehead. We found something. Kia stepped forward. An inscription. We think it's important. Thiruvallur leaned closer, his wise eyes scanning the carvings. His fingers traced the letter A, lingering over its edges. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he murmured, This is no ordinary tablet. Neo and Kia exchanged a glance. Something inside them shifted, as if the world they knew had just changed. For the first time, they weren't just playing at adventure, they had discovered something real. Chapter 3: The Hidden Clue. Neo and Kia stood silently inside the dimly lit library as Thiruvalluvar examined the stone tablet on the wooden table before him. The flickering oil lamp cast long shadows across his face, deepening the lines of wisdom that etched his forehead. Neo shifted on his feet, eyes darting between Thiruvalluvar and the engraved letter A on the stone. The room felt heavier than usual, as if the air carried the weight of history itself. Thiruvalluvar finally spoke. "This," he murmured, "is the beginning of something much greater." Kia leaned forward. "What do you mean?" The old sage exhaled slowly, his fingers grazing the ancient carvings. "This is not just a marking. It is a message left behind by those who came before us." Neo's excitement surged. "So, it's a treasure map? A lost prophecy?" Thiruvalluvar chuckled, shaking his head. "Patience, Neo. Wisdom is not found by rushing ahead. It is uncovered, step by step." Neo crossed his arms. "Did you and Party go to the same school?" Kia, ignoring her brother's impatience, studied the tablet closely. "Have you seen symbols like these before?" Thiruvalluvar nodded. "Once, long ago. These markings belong to an ancient script, one that predates even our village." He paused. This tablet was not meant to be buried. It was meant to be found. Neo's eyes widened. Found by who? Thiruvalluvar's gaze settled on them both, his deep brown eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "Perhaps by you." The word sent a shiver down Kia's spine. Neo straightened. "Well, how do we figure out what it says?" Thiruvalluvar tapped a finger on the stone, thinking. "There is one person who may know more. Master Arivu." Kia perked up. "Who's that?" "The scholar you saw debating in the village," replied Thiruvalluvar. Neo groaned loudly. "Oh, I don't think he'll give us a straight answer. Last time he answered a question with another question." Thiruvalluvar chuckled. "Some knowledge must be earned, Neo. Go to him. He understands the old ways of writing. But listen carefully. Not all wisdom is given directly." Neo sighed, but grabbed the cloth sling holding the heavy tablet. "Fine, but if he starts talking about the meaning of the wind or something like that, I'm leaving." Kia smirked. "I'll hold you to that." The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and distant jasmine flowers as Neo and Kia made their way towards the outskirts of Tulir. Master Arivu lived near the old banyan tree, where the ground sloped gently toward the riverbank. Unlike the other villagers who lived in mud brick houses, he preferred solitude, his stone hut almost hidden beneath climbing vines. The path leading to his house was narrow and uneven, littered with fallen peepal leaves that rustled beneath their sandals. Crickets chirped in the distance, and the occasional hoot of an owl made the shadows feel deeper than usual. "This place feels a little eerie at night," Kia muttered. Neo adjusted the tablet's weight on his shoulder. "Yeah, well, so does Master Arivu." They reached the small wooden door of his house, its frame slightly crooked, as if time itself had pressed down on it. Neo knocked loudly. "Master Arivu, our names are Neo and Kia. We need your help. Thiruvalluvar sent us." Silence. Kia frowned. "Is he even home?" Neo groaned. "He is probably meditating under a tree." Before he could finish, the door creaked open, revealing a thin, wiry old man with a white shawl draped loosely over one shoulder. His sharp, owl-like eyes blinked at them through thick, round glasses. "Knowledge," he said, without greeting them first, "is like a river." Neo blinked. "What does that mean?" Master Arivu tilted his head. "It flows when it is meant to, not when you demand it." Kia sighed. I think that's his way of saying hello." Neo shoved the tablet forward. "Can you tell us what this says?" Master Arivu's brows lifted as he studied the stone slab. He ran his fingers over the engraving, his expression shifting from curiosity to deep thought. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he murmured, "You are looking in the wrong place." Neo's frustration grew. "But Thiruvalluvar said this was the best place to look." Master Arivu smiled slightly. "If I tell you the answer, will you understand it? or is it better to let you find the path on your own? Neo opened his mouth to argue, but Kia nudged him. Master, please, she said, we just want to know what it means. Master Ariva looked at her for a long moment, then gestured for them to enter. Inside, the small hut was cluttered with books, rolled up scrolls, and haphazardly stacked clay tablets. The air smelled of dried ink and old parchment, and a single oil lamp flickered in the centre of the room. Master Ariva set the stone tablet on a low wooden table and studied it under the flame's glow. This, he said, tapping the carved R, is more than a letter. It is the foundation. Kia frowned, but the foundation of what? Master Ariva smiled. Now that is the right question. Neo threw up his hands. Does it have an answer? Master Ariva chuckled. All right, but first, one question. Neo groaned. Why is there always a question? Master Ariva ignored him. What do all words begin with? Kia thought for a moment. With a first letter. Master Ariva nodded. And where do all paths begin? Neo frowned. With a first step? Master Ariva smiled. And where does wisdom begin? Neo and Kia exchanged a look. With 100 questions? Retorted Neo. With understanding, Kia said slowly. Master Ariva leaned forward, tapping the centre of the carved A. This symbol is more than a letter. It represents the very first step of knowledge itself. Neo's breath caught. So, this is part of something bigger? Master Ariva nodded. Yes, but it is not here. Kia's pulse quickened. Where is it? Master Ariva reached behind him and pulled out a worn scroll. He unrolled it carefully, revealing faint ink sketches of symbols and pathways. He pointed to a section marked with a tiny engraving of the letter A. It begins here, he murmured, in the forgotten path. Neo felt his heart hammering. The forgotten path? Kia whispered. Master Ariva's eyes gleamed behind his glasses. An old trail, hidden for generations. I've never quite managed to find it myself. Those who walked it sought wisdom beyond words, and now it seems it is calling to you. Neo swallowed hard. This wasn't just a discovery anymore. It was a quest. Chapter 4. The Village's Oldest Secret. They returned to Thiruvallur's library, but he was not there because he had to attend a special meeting at the palace. There's a palace here, like with a real king and everything, gasped Kia as she sat down at the dinner table. Thiruvallur's maid started serving delicious puris with masala potato curry. Yes, our king is very kind, and Thiruvallur is one of his trusted advisors. Maybe he will take you to meet him one day. Neo lay awake long after they had settled for the night, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, his mind racing. The forgotten path. The name itself sent a shiver of excitement down his spine. What was it? A place? A secret chamber? A lost temple? He turned his head towards Kia's bed across the room. She lay still, her back facing him, but he could tell she wasn't asleep either. You're thinking about this too, aren't you? He whispered. There was a pause before Kia sighed. Of course I am. Neo sat up, resting his chin on his knees. Do you think Master Ariva was serious about the forgotten path calling to us? Kia turned onto her back, staring at the ceiling. I don't know, but I do know one thing. Neo raised an eyebrow. What? She sat up, her dark eyes sharp and determined. We have to find out where it is. Neo grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, the siblings woke up to find Thiruvallur meditating in the grounds behind the library. The village of Tulid was already waking. Farmers were heading to the fields. Women were collecting water in clay pots, and the scent of fresh dosa wafted through the air from a roadside stall. However, Kia and Neo ignored all of this. They were too excited and impatient to tell Thiruvallur what they had discovered the night before. We need to find someone old enough to remember the forgotten path, Kia said, adjusting her satchel strap. Neo thought for a moment. Who's the oldest person in the village? Well, that would be Grandmother Chitra, Thiruvallur replied. She's so old that no one really knows her exact age. Some say she has seen 4 kings come and go, while others swear she is older than the banyan tree itself. If anyone might know about the forgotten path, it would be her. I can drop you there on my way to the market. Kia and Neo's eyes lit up with excitement. Grandmother Chitra's house was small but sturdy. It was made of thick stone with a sloping thatched roof. A woven mat covered her doorstep, and near her window a clay pot bubbled with herbal tea. She was already awake, seated on a low wooden stool, chewing betel leaves as she watched the morning pass. "Ah," she said as they approached, "2 curious children. This can only mean one thing." Neo's eyes widened. "You know what we're going to ask?" Grandmother Chitra smiled. "I have lived long enough to know when an adventure is knocking." Kia crouched beside her. "Grandmother, do you know anything about the forgotten path?" The old woman's fingers paused over her betel leaves. The air around them seemed to shift. Neo noticed it first, the way her unusually bright eyes dimmed, as if remembering something long buried. "The forgotten path," she murmured. Neo and Kia leaned in closer. Grandmother Chitra exhaled, gazing at the horizon. "It is more than a path, my children. It is a journey, a test, and once long ago, it was a gateway." "A gateway to what?" Neo whispered. She looked at them carefully. "To the wisdom of those who came before us." Kia's heart pounded. The wisdom of the past. That had to mean something important. "Where is it?" Neo asked eagerly. Grandmother Chitra shook her head. "It has been lost for generations. Even I have never seen it, only heard stories from those who came before me." "Then how do we find it?" Kia pressed. Grandmother Chitra studied them for a long time before finally speaking. "There is one place that may hold the answer," she murmured. Neo and Kia waited breathless. The old village well. The well stood at the very edge of the village, past the last of the huts, surrounded by wild grass and twisted tree roots. It had been sealed for years, ever since a terrible drought had left it empty. Now the stone walls were cracked, vines curling around the edges. "This thing is ancient," Neo murmured, running his hand along the rough stone. "No one comes here anymore." Kia examined the edges carefully. If something is hidden here, it has to be somewhere in the stones. They searched carefully, touching the walls, running their hands over the carvings, faded by time. And then Kia's fingers brushed something different. A flat stone, slightly looser than the others. "Neo," she whispered. Neo rushed over. "What is it?" Without answering, Kia pressed against the stone, and it moved. A small gap appeared. Neo's breath caught. There's something behind it. Kia reached into the dark space and pulled out a thin, rolled-up piece of parchment. It was fragile with age, the edges crumbling slightly as she unrolled it. Neo leaned in close, his heart pounding. The parchment contained a map, and at the very center, written in ancient script, was a single word, Aharam. Kia stared at the word, her mind racing. Aharam. I remember Party saying this word. What did it mean again? Maybe we should have paid more attention to her stories. "Isn't that the name of the first letter of the Tamil alphabet?" asked Neo. Kia came to a realization. "Why, yes, you're right. Aharam is the name of the letter A symbol we saw on the arch and the tablet." Neo pointed to the drawing on the parchment. "Look, there's a trail leading out of the village. It looks like it goes into the hills." Kia's breath quickened. This must be it, the way to the forgotten path. Neo grinned, feeling a surge of excitement. "I knew it! I knew we'd find something." "I'm not sure about just going off into the unknown without telling someone," objected Kia hesitantly. "What if we get lost or get hurt?" "We already have. We can't go home until we complete our lesson, remember? Party will be looking for us. We have to follow the path to solve the mystery." Neo reasoned a bit too happily. And with no other choice, Kia and Neo decided to follow the path. The forgotten path. Chapter 5. The Path Revealed. The map had shown a trail leading into the hills, past the rice fields and the banyan grove, to a place that no villager had set foot in for generations. Kia traced a finger along the parchment. If we follow this exactly, we should reach the first marker by sunset. Neo adjusted his bag. Then let's stop talking and start walking. The journey started easily enough. The trail wove through golden fields, past small creeks and thick green foliage. Birds chirped overhead, and a few curious rabbits peeked from the bushes before darting away. But as the sun climbed higher, the path became narrower, steeper. The soft dirt gave way to uneven rocks, and the trees grew thicker and darker. Neo wiped his forehead. Why is it always so hot when you're doing something important? Kia, already studying the map again, didn't answer. After another hour, the trail came to an abrupt stop. Neo groaned. You've got to be kidding me. The path ended in front of a massive boulder covered in thick vines. Beyond it, the forest stretched endlessly. This isn't on the map, Kia murmured. Neo walked up and pushed against the rock. Maybe it's blocking the way. Kia studied the stone carefully. It was too smooth and deliberately placed to be a random boulder. There has to be a way past this, she said. Neo, pacing now, muttered, a hidden path, a secret message, an ancient test. What would an ancient scholar put in front of their path? Kia's fingers brushed the boulder's surface and stopped. Near the base, faintly carved into the stone, was a symbol. Neo rushed over. What is it? Kia traced the shape. It was the letter A, just like on the tablet and the map. Neo's pulse quickened. What if it's like a riddle? Maybe we have to say something out loud. Kia thought for a moment. Then standing straight, she took a deep breath and spoke clearly. Aharam? Nah, that's too odd. But before Neo could finish his sentence, the boulder trembled. Neo's eyes widened as dust fell from the cracks. The ground beneath them shuddered, and then the rock slowly slid aside, revealing a dark passage beyond. Neo stared. That was awesome. Kia exhaled, then turned to her brother with a small smirk. Told you it was a test. Neo shook his head in amazement. All right, you win this round. But as they stepped forward into the passage, a thought crossed Kia's mind. If this was just the entrance, what other tests lay ahead? Chapter 6: The First Trial. The massive stone boulder had shifted aside, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. It was dark, calm, and eerily silent, as if the space inside had been untouched for centuries. The air smelled of damp earth and ancient stone, carrying a whisper of something long forgotten. Neo and Kia stood at the threshold, gazing into the shadowed corridor. Neo let out a breath. Well, this is definitely not on any village map. Kia touched the stone wall beside the entrance. It was smooth, almost unnaturally so. This place was built with purpose, she murmured. Neo grinned. Then let's find out what that purpose is. Before Kia could respond, he stepped forward into the passage. Kia sighed but followed. Kia and Neo stepped cautiously into a vast stone chamber, their footsteps echoing around the towering walls. The walls were carved with faint symbols, the same ancient script as the tablet and the map. Kia ran her fingers along the etched markings, tracing their curves. These symbols, I wish we could understand them. Neo tilted his head. They kind of look like stories. See, this one has a man carrying something on his shoulders, and this one, he paused, squinting at the carvings. This one looks like someone standing in front of a giant door. Kia glanced at him. You might be right. Maybe this whole place is telling a story. They walked further, their footsteps echoing in the tight space. Then 3 massive statues stood before them, each one so lifelike it seemed as though they might move at any moment. The first statue depicted a king seated on a throne, his chiseled face stern and unmoving. His broad shoulders carried the weight of command, though his head was bare, missing the crown that should have rested there. Gleamed under the dim torchlight, but there was an empty space in the center of his chest, as if something once belonged there. The third statue was that of an old and wise scholar, his face lined with deep wrinkles. He held an open book in one hand, but his other hand was outstretched, palm facing up, as though waiting for something. At their feet, a small stone pedestal held three carved objects: a crown, heavy and regal, gleaming faintly in the dim light; an eye, smooth and perfectly round, carved from marble; a heart, simple yet intricate, with delicate engravings along its edges. Behind the statues, the exit was sealed, an enormous stone door with ancient carvings stretching across its surface. Above it, an inscription glowed faintly in golden light. True wisdom is more than sight, it is more than power. Restore the peace that completes the journey. Neo cracked his knuckles. Easy, he said confidently. Wisdom is about ruling smartly. A king is wise, right? Before Kia could stop him, he grabbed the crown and pressed it against the king's chest. A deep, grinding rumble shook the chamber. The air grew thick, and dust trickled from the ceiling. But nothing happened. The statue remained unmoving, and the stone door remained shut. Neo groaned. Okay, not that one. Kia studied the warrior. Maybe strength is the answer, she murmured. Maybe wisdom is about protecting what's right. Neo grabbed the heart and placed it into the warrior's chest. Another low rumble vibrated through the floor, but again the door stayed shut. Kia frowned, stepping back to think. The inscription above them repeated in her mind. True wisdom is more than sight. Her eyes drifted to the scholar. Of course, knowledge and learning. That's what wisdom was about. Carefully, she picked up the eye and placed it in the scholar's open hand. A faint golden glow spread through the chamber. The walls seemed to pulse as if acknowledging their choice. Neo grinned. See, that's it. But then, nothing. The glow flickered and vanished. The door remained closed. Neo frowned. Wait, it was half right. Kia bit her lip. If knowledge alone was enough, the test would have ended. Her gaze flickered to the heart, still sitting on the pedestal. True wisdom is more than sight. Her fingers hovered over it as realization struck. Yes, knowledge was essential, but wisdom wasn't just about knowing. It was about understanding, about knowing when to follow your heart. Carefully, she removed the eye from the scholar's hand and instead placed the heart into his palm. The moment it clicked into place, a deep chime rang through the chamber. The statues trembled and then bowed their heads slightly. The stone door at the back rumbled open, revealing the next passage. Neo let out a long breath. Okay, that was tricky. Kia smirked. Lesson learned. Knowledge is important, but sometimes wisdom is about listening to your heart. Chapter 7. The Chessboard of Choices. The passage led them into a vast open hall stretching so far into the distance that they couldn't see the far end. The air inside was strangely cool and still, the kind of silence that made Kia's skin prickle. Then, as soon as they took a step forward, the floor beneath them lit up, revealing a massive chessboard with faintly glowing black and white tiles. Neo gasped, "Whoa!" Before either of them could say another word, the room shifted. At the far end, a massive stone guardian, easily twice their height, slowly raised its head, its glowing golden eyes fixing on them. It stood rigid, a stone sword in its grip, blocking the only visible exit. Suddenly, golden letters shimmered into the air, floating in front of them. The wise do not rush forward blindly. Choose your path carefully. Neo scoffed. Sounds like a fancy way of saying don't fall in a hole. Kia frowned. No, it's a warning. But before she could stop him, Neo boldly stepped onto a black tile. The ground shuddered violently. A deep grinding noise filled the room. The tile beneath his foot began sinking like quicksand. Neo, Kia lunged, grabbing his arm just as he stumbled backwards onto solid ground. The sinking tile vanished completely, revealing a dark abyss beneath it. Neo's face was pale. Oh, okay, not that one. Kia exhaled. See, we can't just step on any tile. Neo looked at the chessboard, rubbing the back of his neck. So, how do we know which ones are safe? Kia studied the pattern, her brain racing. Then something caught her eye. The glowing tiles weren't random. There was a pattern in the ones that were lit up. She bit her lip, thinking hard. That's when she realized the tiles that stayed solid followed the movement of a knight in chess. Of course, she whispered, excitement building. What? Neo asked. Kia pointed. It's like a chess puzzle. A knight doesn't move in straight lines, it moves in an L shape, two spaces in one direction, and then one space sideways. Neo blinked. Are you sure? There's only one way to find out. Taking a deep breath, Kia stepped forward onto a safe tile, following the L-shaped pattern of a knight's move. The tile held firm beneath her feet. She turned back and grinned. It worked! Neo hesitated, then mimicked her step. The ground stayed solid. Okay, I see it now, he nodded, scanning the board. It's like a puzzle. Together, they carefully navigated the chessboard, moving in knight-shaped patterns, sometimes forward, sometimes sideways, never stepping where the board would crumble away beneath them. Every move felt tense and deliberate, like a game in which one mistake could result in falling into the dark void below. At one point, Neo nearly lost his balance, wobbling dangerously close to the wrong tile. Neo, wait! Kia grabbed his arm, pulling him back before he could misstep. Neo swallowed hard. Yikes! Okay, no rushing. Step by step, they moved across the board, their eyes sharp, their movements cautious. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kia stepped onto the last safe tile, just inches from the stone guardian. Neo landed beside her, panting. We made it! For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble, the guardian moved aside, stepping away from the exit. The massive stone doors behind it groaned open, revealing the next passage. Kia exhaled. That was intense. Neo let out a breathy laugh. I actually kinda liked it. Kia smirked. Yeah, because you love puzzles. Neo grinned. Well, lesson learned. Wisdom isn't about moving fast. It's about thinking ahead. With that, they stepped forward, ready for the next challenge. Chapter 8. The Secret Answer. The moment Kia and Neo stepped through the open doors, the sound of their footsteps vanished. The air grew impossibly still. No echoes, no wind, just silence. It was as if the entire chamber had swallowed up all the noise, leaving them in a void of absolute quiet. Neo frowned and waved his hands in front of his ears. Weird, he whispered, but his voice didn't carry. It sounded small, absorbed by the walls before it could even bounce back. The chamber was unlike any they had seen before. No intricate carvings, no statues, no glowing inscriptions, just a single wooden door at the far end. It looked plain, simple, as if it had been forgotten in time. But when Kia walked up to it, she realized something was wrong. There was no handle, no keyhole, no visible way to open it. Just a golden inscription at the top of the door, shimmering faintly in the dim light. Speak the answer and the door will open. Neo perked up. Oh, this one's easy. The answer is wisdom. Nothing happened. The door remained closed. Neo tried again, louder this time. Knowledge? Silence. Kia watched carefully. The more Neo spoke, the more the golden glow above the door faded. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a puzzle about finding the right answer. It was about knowing when not to speak. She reached out and grabbed Neo's wrist. Neo, stop talking. He blinked at her. Why? I'm trying to figure out. Just stop, she whispered. Neo frowned but closed his mouth. The golden glow above the door brightened slightly. A flicker of realization crossed Kia's face. This was the test. Not every challenge was about speaking, solving, or acting. Some were about knowing when to stay silent. She let go of Neo's wrist and slowly took a step back, placing her hands together in front of her. Then she did nothing. Neo hesitated but followed her lead, standing still and silent. A long, empty moment stretched between them. Then, a soft clicking sound. The wooden door creaked open on its own. Neo's mouth dropped open. No way! Kia smirked. Sometimes wisdom isn't about saying the right thing. It's about knowing when to stay silent. As they stepped forward into the next passage, Kia's mind flickered back to everything they had learned. Knowledge was important, but it wasn't enough. Thinking ahead was important, but it wasn't enough. Seeing through distractions was important, but it wasn't enough. This, this was wisdom, the ability to recognize that not everything needed an answer, that some moments required silence, reflection, humility, that wisdom came from something beyond just knowing. Her fingers curled slightly as a new thought took shape in her mind. Kia didn't know how she knew, but she knew. This is what Thiruvallur had been trying to teach. The first verse, the very first truth of wisdom, wasn't about just learning. It was about understanding the source of wisdom itself. She turned to Neo, her voice quiet but firm. Everything we've learned so far, it's leading to something bigger. Neo cocked his head. What do you mean? Kia exhaled, her heart racing as she stepped through the door. I think we're about to find out. And with that, they crossed the threshold, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 9: The Final Chamber. Kia and Neo walked in silence, their minds still lingering on the last trial. It had been so simple, too simple, yet somehow it had felt the most important. As Neo and Kia stepped through the massive stone doorway, a warm and steady golden glow washed over them. The air inside felt different, not musty and old like the previous chambers, but fresh and alive, as if something powerful was waiting. The passage ahead was vast, its high ceiling adorned with thousands of tiny glowing carvings resembling the night sky filled with stars. The walls were smooth and lined with intricate symbols and swirling patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Neo inhaled sharply. Okay, this place is incredible. Kia nodded, her eyes scanning the room. It's like a temple, but unlike anything we've ever seen. Then, without warning, the passageway opened into a vast chamber. The walls were made entirely of mirrors. Endless gleaming surfaces stretched in every direction, reflecting their images 1,000 times over. The light from the torches flickered and danced across them, creating an illusion of infinite space. But something was wrong. The reflections weren't moving correctly. Kia turned her head left, but in one mirror, her reflection turned right. Neo lifted his hand, but some reflections didn't lift theirs at all. A chill ran through her spine. What is this? Neo muttered. Then in the center of the room, words appeared glowing in golden light. To see the truth, find the one who knows the way. Neo exhaled. Okay, no pressure. They both turned in slow circles, watching the distorted reflections. Some were too fast, others too slow. Some hesitated before moving at all. Kia frowned. Something about this felt familiar. The trials they had faced before, the king, the warrior, and the scholar, showing them that true wisdom was more than knowledge. The chessboard, teaching them that wisdom meant thinking ahead. The silent door, revealing that wisdom was knowing when to listen, not just when to act. Now here they were, staring at versions of themselves that weren't real. Kia narrowed her eyes. Find the one who knows the way. Her mind clicked. They had learned that wisdom isn't just about having knowledge, it's about understanding where it comes from. She started scanning the reflections, her heartbeat quickening. One of them would be different. One of them would know. Her eyes darted across the chamber, searching. Then she saw it. One reflection wasn't distorted at all. While all the others lagged or hesitated, this one stood completely still, watching them. Kia took a slow step toward it. The reflection didn't move. She exhaled. It's not reacting to me. Neo noticed it too. Whoa, you think this is the one? Kia took a moment to think. Yes, because it's already where it's meant to be. I am the one that needs to go to my reflection. She walked forward, pressing her palm against the cool glass once she reached the mirror. The moment her fingers touched the surface, the entire chamber shimmered. The distorted reflections vanished one by one until only the true mirror remained. And then the far wall melted away, revealing a doorway bathed in golden light. Neo let out a breath. That was unsettling. Kia didn't respond right away. Her mind was racing. This trial had been different. It wasn't about solving a puzzle or making a choice. It was about recognizing the truth. The truth had always been there, waiting for them to see it. Just like wisdom itself, she turned to Neo, her voice quiet but certain. I think I understand now. Neo blinked. Understand what? Kia looked back at the mirror, watching her reflection, her true reflection. Watch her back. All of this, every challenge, it wasn't just about finding answers. Neo tilted his head. Then what was it about? Kia exhaled. It was about seeing the source of wisdom, understanding that everything comes from something greater than us. Neo frowned. You mean like? She turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. I don't know exactly what yet, but I think we're about to find out. Neo raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he grinned. Well, we did it. That's what matters. Kia glanced once more at the now empty chamber. No more tricks, no more illusions, just truth. They stepped through the golden doorway, the light surrounded them, warm and welcoming, and waiting for them in the next room was Thiruvallavar. And suddenly the room brightened, the walls transforming into a familiar sight. The library. They were back. Neo blinked. Okay, I'm officially impressed. That was some next level magic. Thiruvallavar stood near his writing desk, watching them with knowing eyes. You have returned. Kia swallowed. Had they really left at all? Neo, as usual, didn't hesitate. We made it through all the trials, he said proudly. A bunch of statues tried to trick us. A chessboard nearly swallowed me. A door made me shut up. And we had to find the real us in a creepy mirror room. But we solved everything. Thiruvallavar chuckled softly. And tell me, young ones, what did you learn? Kia hesitated. The answer was there, just beneath the surface, waiting to take shape. She took a slow breath, then spoke carefully. We learned that wisdom isn't just about knowing things. It's not just about being strong or making quick decisions or even being the smartest person in the room. Thiruvallavar nodded, waiting. Kia continued, choosing her words. It's about understanding where knowledge comes from. It's about seeing what's real instead of what we want to see. And sometimes it's about knowing when to listen instead of speak. You have to trust something bigger than yourself. The sage smiled. Yes. The single word held so much weight as if it confirmed everything they had been searching for. Thiruvallavar studied them for a long moment. Then slowly he dipped his quill into a pot of ink and placed it to the parchment. With a steady hand, he began to write. Ahara mudala alattellam Adi Bhagavan mudache ulahu. Thiruvallavar lifted his quill briefly before adding the meaning beneath it. As the letter A is the first of all letters, so is the eternal wisdom the first of all things. He turned the parchment towards them, letting them see the words clearly. This, he said, tapping the parchment lightly, is the first truth, the foundation. Kia traced the letters with her eyes, absorbing every curve, every stroke of the quill. Thiruvallavar glanced up, his smile gentle. Neo and Kia exchanged a look. Somehow they knew. This was just the beginning of something far greater. Chapter 10. A Doorway Between Worlds. The moment Thiruvallavar's quill touched the parchment, a soft hum filled the air. At first it was barely noticeable, like the whisper of a breeze through old paper. But then the hum grew louder, resonating through the library's stone walls, making the ancient scrolls flutter as if caught in an unseen wind. A golden glow seeped from the ink, tracing the curves of each carefully written letter. The air shimmered, thick with an energy that sent goosebumps down Kia's arms. Neo barely had time to react before the ground beneath them vanished. A rush of air roared in their ears, pulling them into a weightless void. For a moment, everything was light, blinding, endless light. Then thud! Neo groaned as he landed flat on his back, straw and dirt pressing into his palms. The sharp scent of dry wood and damp earth filled his nose. A distant rustling echoed in the quiet, followed by the soft creak of wooden beams. He blinked. The golden glow was gone. They were home. Kia scrambled to her feet, her breath quick and uneven. She turned in a circle, eyes darting around. The towering stone shelves of the ancient library had disappeared. In their place stood the cramped wooden walls of Party's shed, shelves lined with old bottles, rusted tools, and stacks of forgotten books. The archway stood behind them, its once swirling portal now dark and lifeless, the carvings dull and unmoving. If they hadn't just walked through it, Kia might have thought it was nothing more than an old crumbling relic. Neo clutched his stomach. I think I'm starving. Before Kia could answer, a voice rang out, clear and familiar. Kia, Neo, come inside. Dinner's ready. They froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kia dashed to the door and peered outside. The sun was still setting, casting the same golden glow over the yard that had been there before their journey began. The trees swayed gently, and the scent of jasmine and evening air remained exactly as it had been. No time had passed at all. Kia's head spun. It didn't make sense. They had travelled across time, stood in an ancient library, deciphered riddles, and watched Thirukkural write the first lines of wisdom that would last for centuries. And yet, they were right back where they started, as if none of it had happened. Neo let out a breathy laugh, shaking his head. Okay, that was intense. Kia took a deep breath, the weight of their adventure settling in. I think I finally understand, she murmured. Neo raised an eyebrow. Understand what? The first Kural, she said, running her fingers over the ink. It's telling us that everything begins with something greater than us, that wisdom, learning, even this journey, it all starts with something beyond just what we see. Neo exhaled, nodding slowly. Yeah, I guess we saw that firsthand, huh? They had struggled, searched, and learned, but none of it had been about finding the right answer. It had been about understanding the truth behind it. Kia smiled. It's not just about knowing things, it's about understanding where they come from, the foundation of everything. The cool evening breeze swept through the shed, rustling the parchment edges in Kia's hands. The arch behind them stood silent, but something told Neo it wouldn't stay that way forever. They had taken their first step toward wisdom. Little did they know their next lesson was just around the corner. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Kural Inspired Stories. What did Kia and Neo's journey teach you? How does this wisdom apply to your own life? Remember, the Thirukkural isn't just an ancient text, it's a guide for living a meaningful life, even today. If you enjoyed this adventure, follow the podcast and leave a review. Your support helps others discover these stories too. Want to explore these stories even further? The books that accompany this podcast are available on Amazon, complete with reflection activities at the back to help you think, journal, and apply what you've learned. Check out the link in the description to get your copies. But Kia and Neo's journey is far from over. In the next episode, they find themselves in a city where reflections are fading and knowledge without action has led to a dangerous trap. Can they uncover the truth before it's too late? Join me for the next adventure in the mirror and the endless maze. Until then, keep seeking, keep learning, and most importantly, keep taking action.